Good morning, everybody here in the US, and good afternoon in Europe. Welcome to our panel. This is Pablo.zuanic, Cannabis Equity Analyst at Zuanic and Associates. I'm very happy to be hosting this panel today. I know most of you in the US are very focused on the rescheduling news, and of course, so we are. So are we, but there's a lot happening in Europe, and particularly in the Netherlands, there's this pilot going on, which we think would have a significant growth benefits for the players that are involved. So very glad to be hosting this panel. We have four speakers. Mike Gorenstein, he's the CEO of Cronos Group. We have Rick Bakker, CEO of Hollandse Hoogtes. We have Bastiaan Swagger, he's the CEO and co-founder of Legacy Brands. And we have Vladimir Smetanin, CEO of the Growery. Welcome to all our speakers.
Thank you.
And again, for the audience, as they have attended our panels before, I ask most of the questions. If you want to ask questions, please email them to me or put them on the chat room here in Twitter and or on Zoom, and I'll do my best to read some of them. Okay, we want to start with brief introductions, and then we'll delve in more detail into some of the market and the recent transactions. So, Rick, I'll start with you. If you can make a brief introduction about yourself and brief overview about your Dutch operation.
Yes, thank you, Pablo. My name is Rick Bakker. I'm the CEO of Hollandse Hoogtes, one of the 10 licensed growers participating in the Dutch closed coffee shop chain experiment. About Hollandse Hoogtes, we are a fully indoor growing facility with a year-round production capacity of around 150 to 200 kilograms per week. We produce flower, pre-rolls, hashies, edibles, all of which is legalized now in the experiment. I think with our team, we bring decades of experience from within the Dutch and international cannabis and coffee shop culture with a main focus on quality and craftsmanship. This experiment we try to also embed in Hollandse Hoogtes. So we focus on selecting the best genetics, growing fully controlled, and a lot of quality measures throughout the entire process. I think example given of that is that we are among one of the few growers who have deliberately chosen not to invest in trimming machines, so that every flower that consumers get from us is hand trimmed.
Thank you, Rick. Bastiaan, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Bastiaan Swagger here. You asked me to say a little bit about myself. So my background is more in natural health related businesses. I founded and started a couple of different businesses related to organic superfoods, but also to cryotherapy, which I exited once I joined this program. I've also been a cannabis cultivator and producer of edibles for a number of years. Our company is called Legacy Brands, and we like to baptize ourselves as Legacy Brands because we have collaborations with a lot of legacy people from the industry. So a lot of old school cultivators, a lot of well-established brands in the national and international side. But we are in a very nice but a little bit challenging location, very close to the Schiphol airport. So we had a little bit of fashionably late entry to the market. But we are live, we are operational, and yeah, we have a great team from many different sectors and a lot of very cool brands that we collaborate with. So we're excited to join this call. So thanks for the invitation and to be part of this program.
Thank you, Bastiaan. Vladimir, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Vladimir Smetanin. So I was born in Moscow, started my career in BCG, so did a lot of projects in different industries. Then started my entrepreneur career. So I did business in logistics, FMCG, fintech, and so on and so on. So 9 years ago, I moved to Switzerland. And 6 years ago, being non-smoker at all, even cigarettes, I started to do this cannabis business in Switzerland. So we started with acquisition of small shares in a company, Swiss Extract. Later, we became the biggest shareholder and now a majority shareholder in Mary Jane. And then we bought a company in Germany for medical THC distribution, IMP. And 2 years ago, we started our journey in Dutch experiment. So we're happy to buy this license for Growery. And so recently finished facility started to grow and to supply to coffee shops. So our primary idea is to build nice and good and very valuable portfolio in Europe. So Dutch experiment is a crucial part of our business, but not the only one. And really happy to speak to the guys here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. And last but not least, of course, Mike Gorenstein. He's the CEO of the Cronos Group. Mike, if you can, the audience, of course, is very familiar with Cronos Group, but if you can just give a brief overview about Cronos, and then if you want, you can jump straight into the recent transaction you announced in the Netherlands with Canada. But go ahead, Mike.
Sure. So, I started Cronos a little over 10 years ago. Our primary markets are Canada, Israel. We have operations on the ground. We had the first license in Canada. So number one market share in Israel. We also have distribution in Germany, Switzerland, UK, Malta, and Australia. We really focus on the idea of borderless products, very big into genetic breeding. We think that innovation is really key for the industry. And I think we look for markets where we'll be able to take our portfolio of products, bring things to cannabis consumers that maybe haven't always been available, and sort of look for our spot. And that was one of the things we loved about the Netherlands, is I think that you've got a really rich history of cannabis culture in the Netherlands. In my mind, I think of it as sort of like the longest running, from a consumer perspective, legal market. And we think it's really exciting. We think that the policy is great. We think the way that's rolled out is great. Obviously, anyone you talk to in any market will always tell you the things that they don't like about the market, but when you compare them all, I think it's extremely favorable. So last week we announced a definitive agreement to acquire one of the 10 licenses and enter. From our perspective, we thought it was a great fit. It's pretty much the only greenhouse for the 10 licenses. We felt like it's a segment that the other licenses aren't necessarily going after, and sort of like the mainstream to value consumer. And we love the availability of different product formats in Netherlands. So we're excited to be a part of the experiment, to be good steward of capital, a good stakeholder, and good participant, and do our part to make sure that the program expands to the rest of the Netherlands.
Mike, just on the Canada deal, maybe talk about the metrics, right? I think that obviously you've shared those in a press release and in a corporate deck, very detailed. Just I think the transaction multiple on the EBITDA side was about 2.5 times. Just if you can discuss that and the need to invest, how much investments will you need to make to either expand or touch up the facility?
Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily much that we need to do on the expansion side. I think that, I just point out the licenses are more or less locked to the structure that's approved. So, to the extent that there's some limited maintenance Capex, that's something that we're prepared for. I think that there's some Capex that may need to go in for different product formats. Nothing that's really that significant, but for different edibles formats, for bringing vapes to market, maybe some improvements around pre-rolls. But a lot of the investments, I think that there's R&D that we've already made the investments in historically that we can bring over. But it's the way we look at it, expansion would be something that you would think of when you have something new that expands beyond the 4 years, or even beyond the 18 months.
Right.
Right now we feel that we have the infrastructure and capacity to supply the market today.
Right. And the last question on the deal, Mike, if you can, as you mentioned, you operate in several markets. Is this something you've been following for quite a while, or was this something more recent? How you characterize the timeline in terms of the decision-making process?
Yeah, we've had the discussions going on for about, I think we met about a year ago. It's something that we were monitoring. And, I think a year ago was sort of this idea, and it was an interesting thing that, could happen or might happen. I think 2020 is really when, I was aware of the legislation, but as all cannabis markets, things don't necessarily go along the timeline you hope. But really April's when we saw things start picking up and really felt like there was real momentum. And so, kept in touch, kept the dialogue going, and I ended up feeling there's a real culture fit and a real opportunity to collaborate. And so, we've been talking for about a year and been aware of the program for a little longer.
Right. Great. Thank you. So look, we're going to move the discussion now to trying to size up the market, but let's talk about the market, Rick, first before the pilot, right? For the audience, this is a global audience, right? Please explain the coffee shop system in general. I think there are about 500 of these type of stores in the Netherlands. How big are they? The services, online menus, delivery pickup, all cash, any sales taxes. Just explains for the audience how the system works, ex the pilot. All right, we're not talking about the pilot yet. Thanks.
No problem, Pablo. I think the best way to compare a coffee shop is that it's the Dutch equivalent of a cannabis dispensary. They're not mainly selling coffee, but mainly selling cannabis. But there are also some important differences. At this moment, you indeed have, I think, 550, 560 coffee shops in the Netherlands, spread out throughout almost 100 municipalities, maybe a little more. And the majority of those coffee shops, they still operate under the tolerance policy, meaning that they're not fully legalized, but are tolerated under strict conditions by their municipalities. And 10 of those municipalities are now participating in the Dutch coffee shop experiment, where cannabis is supplied through fully legal and regulated supply chain. In the other 90 municipalities, the coffee shops are not allowed to purchase from one of our companies. This situation is referred to as the achterdeur in the Netherlands, or the backdoor in English, where retail sales are tolerated, but the supply side is still illegal. And I think another main difference for the dispensaries in the US and Canada is that a coffee shop also is a place where consumers are allowed to use cannabis on site in designated lounges. Many coffee shops also offer food and non-alcoholic drinks, including coffee. And at the same time, it's also possible for a coffee shop to operate without a lounge, so focusing solely on retail sales or takeaway. I think both experiment and non-experiment coffee shops are allowed to sell small quantities of cannabis under strict conditions. The maximum is 5 grams. It's adult only, of course, and advertising is prohibited. I think those are the 5 most important rules a coffee shop has to apply to within a municipality.
Historically, in the legacy system, in terms of supply chain, I know it's a gray supply chain, as you mentioned, right? But there's no testing, have there been safety concerns? Have there been any issues over the years on the supply side in terms of where the consumer ends up buying, or not really? It's worked out fine, Rick.
Yeah, there are sometimes mentions in the media that there are, for example, synthetic THC is added to cannabis flower. There are even examples that stuff that isn't necessarily flower, for example, pieces of glass or hairspray or anything is added to the flower to make it heavier, because the illicit producer, they get paid for the weight they deliver to the coffee shops and not always necessarily for the quality. Their testing is not even allowed. Well, at least not laboratory testing by the coffee shops that are not participating.
Right. Rick, and one last one. Outside those 550 coffee shops, is there another illicit market in the Netherlands, in your opinion, or not really?
Yes, I think when the Dutch coffee shop system was introduced, the primary purpose was to not to promote cannabis use, but to separate the markets for soft drugs and hard drugs.
Yeah.
And I think that came out of the idea that, like the illicit market, a dealer on the street, they will sell you everything you want to have from them, not only cannabis, but also hard drugs. So coffee shops have always played a role on the retail side, but there are still groups of people not allowed to buy cannabis in coffee shops, mostly the underaged. And I think therefore there still is an illicit market outside of the coffee shops, but the coffee shops are placed to have like soft drugs very much separated from the street
Right.
dealers.
Thank you. Thank you. And look, and before we go to a pilot, Vladimir and Bastiaan, again, for the audience, let's talk about the size of the Dutch market right now, right? There's an estimate out there about $1.4 billion, I think it is, a bit less in euros. That implies about $75 per capita. For us, that's very low. Michigan in the US, of course, is the highest, north of 300. Several states in the US are 200. California is criticized, but it's around 140, 150 on the legal side. So when I hear 75 in the Netherlands with this supposedly very successful coffee shop system of 550 outlets, the 75 seems low to me. But any thoughts you may have on the current size of the market, and maybe that 1.4 billion number is wrong. Vladimir, I'll start with you.
Yeah, our estimation is it's 1.5 to 2 billions.
Okay.
The market. You're absolutely right. Per capita consumption is not as big as in States, but we see it in a way that Netherlands is not fully legalized yet. It's not like in California or in Colorado. Yeah, so we primarily we analyze the percentage of people who consume every day, and this number in Netherlands is about 3.2, 3.5%. In California now it's about like 12%. In some states up to 15. Actually, it's a core consumer segment which actually generate 80 to 82% of the volume. And what's usually happening in the countries, or mostly we can judge only by the states, after 5 to 7 to 9 years, the percentage of people who consume every day increased. And then actually, this is a logic how we see the market. It's a way how we go from 75 per capita to 200.
Okay, thank you. Bastiaan, on the same question, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, our estimates are that the market is higher than that. Even it's more up to 2.5 billion even, because otherwise you're if you're talking about this 1.4, you're doing an estimate of around 2 million euros per year in sales, which is quite low. I mean, this does not take into account the fact that in the larger cities there's coffee shops that are doing 10, to up to 20 plus million. So the market in that sense is a lot larger than what you have proposed. So yeah, especially since these large cities are not included, and we also know that a lot of coffee shops that still have this backdoor policy, the numbers that they are able to produce or that they are submitting are also often a little bit skewed. And of course, they can have an accounting which is a little bit flexible and creative to work in their favor.
Right. So, Bastiaan, I mean, if you calculate a 2.5 billion from those 550 coffee shops, how much larger would the illicit market be? Will it be another billion, 2 billion? I know it's hard to estimate, but do you have an estimate on that, on the illicit market?
The illicit market besides the coffee shops?
Yeah, besides the 2.5.
I think I would say it's relatively small.
Okay.
Because as Rick pointed out, I mean, only underage people or people that are living in cities where you have the I criterion, so where only inhabitants of that municipality are allowed in.
Yeah.
Those are the only places where people can buy cannabis. But for the rest, it's the market is not that big from my experience.
Thank you.
Also,
Bastiaan, I'm going to stay with, go on, sorry, go on. Yep.
no, also just because it's so accepted to go to a coffee shop and people still have the sense that it's safe, even though maybe it's not part of the pilot project and the products aren't tested, it still feels like a safe environment, safe and controlled, and it gives a sense of security.
Right. Mike, did you want to bring something up? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out a difference. If I assume most of the audience is North American here. When you go in, say California, across the US, in Canada, you see dispensaries, the equivalent of a coffee shop, everywhere. And it's often hard to know, is this a fully licensed federally or state legal dispensary, or is it one that is, gray market? And what I think is really interesting is that when you go around the Netherlands, you don't see coffee shops that aren't municipally permitted or licensed. They would be shut down. So despite the tolerance policy, you actually have extremely tight regulations on those tolerated stores. So I think you would assume would be much looser, but you actually have inventory limits, that they actually strictly follow. Mm-hmm. It is pretty tightly controlled. So when we think of the illicit market in the US, you're thinking of, or even like Toronto, the famous example, there was a store that wasn't licensed that the police shut down multiple times. They even put cinder blocks in front of the dispensary to try to stop people, and then they put a tent and sold outside. It doesn't really happen like that in the Netherlands. It's actually pretty regulated and pretty carefully followed. I think it's in that respect, it's a little bit more mature because it's been around for so long.
Right. That's a great point. Thank you. Bastiaan, I want to stay with you now, moving the discussion to the state of the pilot right now, the 10 LPs, 72 shops right now, 10 towns. Bastiaan, is the pilot already up and running? When did it officially start? Are supplies still limited? When did sales in the pilot towns begin? Are the coffee shops in the pilot towns 100% compliant? I mean, meaning only buying from the 10 LPs? How is this controlled or enforced? I know there's a lot there. Is there a track and trace system for the LPs? But if you can talk about the state of the pilot, Bastiaan, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. The pilot officially started in April of this year. That's when it really fully took off. There was like a kind of trial startup phase, which started in December of the year before. So it was about like it was 1.5 years actually, kind of like a transition phase into the full experiment start with only 2 municipalities joining. But currently, all the coffee shops are being supplied by the 10 legal cultivators, and all 10 cultivators are up and running. And yeah, the main way that this is enforced or that this is regulated is through the track and trace system. So that's what the coffee shops and the cultivators have to use. And unfortunately so, because it's not the easiest and most user-friendly system developed by the Dutch government. But we're grateful that we can work with it, that we're part of this program. But yeah, everybody now has to purchase their products from us and the other 9 cultivators.
Right. And in your opinion, the system is being enforced, is working, you have track and trace, so it would be very unlikely for any of these licensed shops in the pilot towns to be selling unlicensed product.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mike and Rick, on the state of the pilot, any feedback you've heard from consumers? I'll start with you, Rick, first. Feedback from consumers and coffee shops. Can we assume people in the non-pilot towns are traveling to the shops in the pilot towns? If so, why? What is the feedback from consumers so far, from coffee shop owners in the pilot towns and shops? The pilot began with 85 shops. Now we're down to 72. Did some exit the pilot? What happened there? Again, I know there's a lot there, but Rick, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I recently spoke with some of our clients, and some of them report 10 to 20% increase in sales. One of them is located in Zaandam, which is next to Amsterdam. So yeah, I think some people are now trying and going to explore the stuff we produce in the experiment. And other shops also that were more focused on Moroccan hashish, which was a very big part of a lot of coffee shops in the Netherlands and is unavailable in the current experiment anymore. They noticed a slight decline in sales. So it really depends on who you ask if the coffee shops are happy. Looking at turnover, looking at all the other aspects in the experiment, I think most of them tend to be very happy and very satisfied. They no longer have to deal with the so-called backdoor, and they are also no longer responsible for managing complex and risky logistics if you can only have 500 grams of shelf storage in the shop. You have to have multiple drivers going around all day long to provide the cannabis into the coffee shop. So I think in that way, the coffee shop owners are very satisfied. And if we look at online forums, videos, or consumer reviews, I think the general sentiment among those is also very positive.
Right.
They really see an increase in quality of flower.
Any thoughts in terms of why I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but at the start, I thought I had heard of 85 coffee shops in the pilot, and now we're down to 72. Did some exit because you were not happy with the system? Any thoughts on that? Or maybe I'm wrong about the 85 number, Rick?
No, I think with 85 you are correct. But this was always a theoretical maximum number of shops that could participate in the experiment. In practice, the actual number was always somewhat lower due to local laws mainly. Municipalities have a maximum amount of coffee shops that are allowed in their municipality. And in some of the municipalities participating in the experiment, they still have some open spots for those coffee shop. For example, in Tilburg, there is an allowance of 13 coffee shops, while only 9 are currently active. So over time, the theoretical number of participating coffee shop can increase to 85. But right now, it's that they have space for extra coffee shop does not automatically mean that new coffee shops receive licenses or are actually open. Example given is that Tilburg and Arnhem, who have free spaces for coffee shop, recently stopped their procedures due to objections from local residents following the proposed locations, etc.
Okay, thank you. Mike, on the same topic, the feedback you're getting from the consumers and coffee shops, how the pilot is going. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, and just on the last point, I would just say it's not really up to the coffee shops, it's up to the municipality. So it's sort of an all or nothing, right? I think that if a municipality is part of the program, it's not a coffee shop saying, do I want to be part of the program? Then the municipality, it's part of the experiment or it's not part of the experiment, and the coffee shops sort of fall into that. Look, the feedback I think that we've gotten, it's certainly evolved. I think, especially when you have an industry that's been running as long as this one has, change is something that people don't love. But I think that's evolved. So there's actually 2 kind of key periods for the experiment that are relevant. In April, when all of the experiment stores were forced to buy everything except for hash from the 10 LPs. And then recently in September, when they were forced to buy then all of it from the 10 LPs. And I think initially, part of the reason you had those 2 dates is there was a perception there wasn't enough quality product, there wasn't enough supply, and that's why it was sort of phased in. So I think, in April, that was probably something that's tough. You have to change over your supply chains. But I think the feedback has definitely improved since April. I think you're seeing quality go up. I think availability is going up. Not every LP was online at the time it started. So I think things are improving, and I'll echo the sentiment on safety and on certainty. It's hard to imagine, but despite this being around for so long, people are basically sneaking in product. You can't openly have delivery scheduled. You have 500 grams versus a week worth of inventory you can carry. So I think that having that consistency, the safety, it's just easier for them to run the business. And so I think that, I think perception has probably changed and feedback has changed from the coffee shop owners. I think that they like the program, and I think that you don't hear many saying they'd want to go back.
Right. And before I move on to the speakers, in terms of 500 gram, that was for the legacy coffee shops, right? But the inventory for the new shops is different, correct?
It's a week supply.
They can.
Yeah. Mike, what would be your, I should know this number, but for a typical dispensary in the US, how many grams would they hold of inventory? I know there's many products there, but just to put 500 in context.
It depends state by state. A lot of times it really depends on the vault, and again, really depends on the state, but your vault size really does determine it. So, if you have a much larger vault and you can show you have the security, you carry it, but 500 grams, I can't think of a single state where you'd have a limit like that. You're looking at multiple kilos on an equivalence basis, so significantly more. And I think that's one of the challenges for the tolerated coffee shops is you're having multiple deliveries a day. That is really
right.
You've got some of the stores in North America that go through 500 grams in an hour. That's not a lot.
Yeah. Vladimir and Bastiaan, if you want to add anything in terms of feedback you've heard from the consumers or coffee shops in the pilot towns, but I'll move the discussion. I'll start with you, Vladimir. In terms of pricing, any thoughts on wholesale and retail prices, ranges? From the numbers that Canada disclose, profit margins seem to be quite attractive, but talk about pricing. How do prices compare with the illicit market and even prices in the pilot towns, shops with the shops in the non-pilot towns? And as we've seen in other markets, is there a risk of a race to the bottom here price-wise? What I hear is that pricing is still holding up quite well. But I'll start with you, Vladimir, on the pricing question. And if you want to add anything in terms of feedback you've heard from consumers and coffee shops also. And then on to Bastiaan.
Yeah, we see in terms of price that in coffee shops with an experiment, the prices are like 10 to 15% are higher due to like additional work which need to be done, trace and track, and so on, so on. But we see it's a more or less stable situation. I think much more interesting in the dynamic will happen between the license holders and price policies. Yeah, because in the past, like when experiment just started, it was not enough product on the market. It was definitely some deficit. Now, when more or less all the coffee shop, all the license holders on the market and bring product, so now it's some pressure. So this dynamic is much more important for the pricing for next like 6-12 months. Really interesting. In terms of the feedback from the coffee shops, absolutely agree with my colleagues. Yeah, absolutely positive feedback. And just want to mention that actually the old system before experiment, the new system now after experiment, it will change completely the coffee shop landscape. Because in the past, when coffee shops develop own portfolio of the strains, it was more or less the system of expensive and good coffee shops in the center with a more volume, better product, and so on, and some more or less like cheaper and low volume coffee shops somewhere outside of the cities. Now, when all the coffee shops have access to the same license holders, to the same products, you don't need to go to city center to buy the same product you could buy like in a shop nearby. And this will change a little bit dynamic and volumes and everything, and a big opportunity for license holders to develop like exclusive strains or some special products and so on. We're just in the beginning of this process.
Right. Thank you. Bastiaan, on the same question?
Yeah, no, I agree with Rick and Mike for sure. Definitely, the coffee shops are happy with the developments, with the fact that they don't have to deal with this, illegal backdoor, which is all cash, even though most of the consumers are paying by card in the coffee shops. So this is a big headache to have to go to a cash register and get your cash money in order to pay for your backdoor. So there's a lot of advantages besides just the 500-gram limit. It takes away a lot of the logistics of having to, for instance, roll your own pre-rolls, like a lot of coffee shops were still doing, or pre-package your own product, things like that. The consumers also like it. I have friends that drive 30 minutes to another town in order to buy their weed there, in a legal store, even though they have, like old school coffee shops in their own municipality. So it gives a sense of just security and trust in the product and in the brands. People like the products that are on the market, and especially for high quality indoor, the prices definitely have been stable. So we're at an interesting point, but definitely also, like Vladimir pointed out, a lot of the shops that sometimes maybe had access only to perhaps some mediocre product now have access to a much wider range of products. So it's easier for consumers to get high quality products from pretty much all the coffee shops in their municipality.
Bastiaan, I mean, on the question of pricing, I don't know if you can give some numbers for the indoor product, like at retail on average, what would be the price per gram and the wholesale price? I mean, just rough average, if you have a sense.
Retail, like between 10 to 12 euros, and wholesale, half of that.
Right. And Mike, I'll bring you in on the discussion here on pricing specifically. I don't know if you want to comment about how Canada LR was positioned price-wise versus the rest of the market, given that their product was mostly greenhouse, if you want to comment only.
Yeah, I think, roughly 20% cheaper. And again, it's a greenhouse product versus indoor product. So I think that, the point I was making on segmentation, I think we tend to be going after a different consumer. So I think there's probably a price index. So of course, if prices move up or down, you kind of see that spread exist, the same as you see in North America. But generally, when you compare the prices and you think about the different drivers, the fact that you don't have the same disadvantages versus the not sort of regulated or as tightly regulated market, again, it's called the gray market. You don't have an excise tax that significantly increases costs. You don't have VAT being charged at retail, and that means that you don't have the your kind of gray market competition having an advantage to be able to underprice you. You also likely don't have the same scale there given, the limit. So I think when you look at like the early reports out of Colorado, Oregon, California, Canada, as legal product came online, gray market could say, well, we're just going to undercut it. We don't have those regulatory costs. And it's a little bit different in the Netherlands. So, I don't think you're going to see price compression that's coming from gray market. I think that, obviously there can be questions about supply and how those dynamics play out. But you've got two separate markets that aren't competing in the same locations. I don't think that you have the same capital cycle, and because you have locked licenses, I don't know that I would expect to see what you saw in Canada, Oregon and Washington anytime soon. Things may get more competitive, but I don't think it'll be to the same extent. And maybe others have a different view, but it feels like when you add up total capacity, it's not very significant.
Right. Thank you. Before we move on, Rick, in terms of if you want to add anything on the shop side, in terms of their supply chain, is there anything different about the pilot shops versus the non-pilot shops? Are the pilots allowed to do delivery? I think someone mentioned they can take credit cards. Any extra color you can give there, Rick? I know we touched on it partially already.
Yeah, we touched already about the stock in the vault. A non-pilot shop can only hold 500 grams. A pilot shop can hold up to a week supply, which for some shops is over 10, 20 kilos. I think one of the main differences is also that we as growers have to pack everything into the final product for the consumer. And we are required to put a seal on it. And that seal may only be broken by the final consumer. So that ensures product integrity and full traceability there. I think something that's already very common in the US and Canadian market. I think moreover, the most important difference is the level of consumer information. Like we are all allowed and required to clearly label the products with detailed information from laboratory tests, such as the THC result, the harvest date, the packing date, and all other relevant product details. While in non-pilot coffee shops, I think this information is often, incomplete or not available at all. What's also interesting is that the experiment gives a lot of coffee shops new opportunities in terms of consumables in the form of edibles and vaping devices. A lot of municipalities in the Netherlands have strict regulations about edibles. In Amsterdam, for example, not participating in the experiment, but you can only have edibles that have like as main component cakes. And in other municipalities like Almere, it was even forbidden to sell edibles in the coffee shop. And now we as legal producers can create all different kind of edibles as long as we don't use chemical extracts to create them. So that offers a lot of new products for the pilot shops as well.
Are the pilot shops allowed to do delivery, Rick?
No, both are not allowed to do delivery.
I think you or someone else said that they can take credit cards, but the non-pilot shops can only take cash. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. Both can have both PIN and credit card and cash transactions. I think actually even in the non-pilot shops, most of them have 60 to 80% of digital transactions at this time of.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
If you're seeing it skew towards debit, that's more of just how transactions are done in the Netherlands and generally in Europe versus North America. It's much more debit versus credit.
Is that right? And then most of the shops have very detailed menus online, right? Can pickup be done? Can I pre-order and pick up from the store, Rick or Mike?
No, that's not allowed. You cannot order in advance. You have to be lucky that a certain strain is available. Even if it's on the menu, it doesn't always mean it's available. And I think there with the weak stock for the pilot shops, it's much more common to have access to your favorite strain in terms of the non-pilot shops who always have to juggle with the 500 grams.
Right. Thank you. Look, we're going to move the discussion now to understand a little bit more about the 10 LPs, especially the four that are here. I'll stay with you, Rick. If you can discuss, in terms of what you can share, if you can discuss your performance so far, sales, SKUs, distribution coverage, awards, reviews, how do you think you rank versus other LPs in terms of either capacity or size or sales, and any expansion plans you may want to talk about? Again, in terms of what you can share, Rick.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud to be the CEO of Hollandse Hoogtes because we recently won quite some awards at the Cannabis Industry Awards, which was a Dutch award where we won the best flower, best hash, best pre-roll, and ultimately the Grower of the Year award from the participating growers. I think more interesting even was this summer the Jack Harrah Cup. It's a particularly meaningful competition for us because we were also competing against Illicit flower. And yeah, there we also won some very nice prizes with a third prize, first prize, and second prize in 3 different categories. So in terms of awards, we're doing quite well right now. In terms of distribution, we're currently supplying 55 coffee shops within the experiment, with a weekly sales ranging between 120 to 140 kilograms. And in terms of volume, ranking us with the other licensed producers, I don't think we are the largest. We are most likely competing for a position in the top 3 there. And when it comes to quality and brand recognition, I believe we perform quite strongly.
Thank you. Can you share any thoughts on Can you share anything on capacity? Only if you can, if you want to.
Yeah, we're selling each week's harvest. So the 120 to 140 kilograms is our capacity right now. And we are actively in the process of building out an internal extra capacity. So we can add another 60% of production capacity to our current building.
Thank you. Bastiaan, if you can tell us about legacy brands. I don't want to say if you were the last ones to market, but if you can just tell us more color in terms of your capacity, how are you doing so far? And if you can remind us, when did you start actual sales? And I always get the question whether there's any connection between legacy brands and the cookies brand, but maybe that's a mistake. Go on, Bastiaan. Thank you.
Originally, we were closely affiliated to Cookies. We still have some connections there, but we decided as a Dutch entity and working with so many other brands and having so many people from the Dutch legacy industry, we felt like we had to create our own kind of umbrella since we wanted to also give a place to a lot of old school brands that we love and that we've been working with for years, such as like Greenhouse Seeds, Serious Seeds, The Pollinator, Souvenir. Like really established old school legacy people here, All Star Genetics. So in terms of awards, our cultivation team and our partners have won many, many, many awards, but just none from this legal facility yet. So like I mentioned in the beginning, we are fashionably late. We started production this year, and we have a lot of products that are going to come out very soon. We have a lot of pre-orders and sales and a lot of really nice new innovative products that I think that are going to come to market. So and we are still expanding. So I think we're at the right size to produce really high quality flower and products, but we are definitely taking the next step as well towards expansion.
And how many shops do you think you could be by end of March? And again, only if you can share that, Bastiaan, what would be your estimate in terms of distribution coverage by next March?
Well, I would say we will definitely like to be in around 20 or 30 shops already, at least have our products, but we have conversations with most of the shops. So it's more about how we're going to distribute the products that we have, but we like to be open to everybody.
Right. Thank you. Vladimir, again, same question in terms of what you can share about your operation. And I think there's some history here with the license. It used to belong to Aurora, right? Cannabis, which exited the market. Here we have Cronos and Village Farms that have entered the market, right? They sold you the license. Just tell us a little bit about that part of the story. And then when did you start sales in the Netherlands? And, any color you can share in terms of capacity, SKUs, and distribution coverage. Vladimir.
Yeah. So the story of our license, we bought it from Aurora, but not directly. It was some small deal. So first to our local partners from Netherlands. They bought this license from Aurora, then we bought it from them. So they still stay as our partners for a small amount of shares. And later we built facility. We finished the facility only a few months ago. Now is our second run for like half of the rooms. Our total capacity is like 6 to 8 tons. Yeah, depends on harvest and everything. Everybody knows like first runs usually not the best runs, but so far we managed to sell even these flowers. More realistically, in terms of like monthly revenue and EBITDA, all this is better to talk in the first quarter, because still it's like we just started and managed this. And now we supply to 56 coffee shops, but it's still just initial phase. So for us, the most critical quarter will be first quarter next year.
Thank you. Mike, on the same question, I know you've touched on the Canada operation already, but any further color you want to add here in terms of SKUs, distribution coverage, expansion plans? But I know you touched on it partially already.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we've got pretty much full distribution at the moment. I think that expansion, there's certainly improvements that we can make operationally. I think a focus will be on bringing new SKUs to market. But beyond like on the actual financial metrics, just given what we've already disclosed, I can't really go into more details. But we're really excited for moving forward to close the transaction and bring new products to market. And I think generally you'll see a lot from not just us but other licensed producers bring products to market that, given the regulations and the kind of legacy tolerated market, it'll be a lot more variety. And I think that's exciting, and that's positive for consumers and for the experiment overall.
Right, Mike. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I had heard there had been some other issues with the Canada facility. Maybe that has already been fixed, or it's something easy to fix. Do you want to comment on that briefly?
Yeah, I think there were issues with complaints around odor. I think that's been a few facilities have had it. Early on, when the facility was up and running, there were not really the types of odor mitigation measures in place that would be considered best practices. So that's something that the 3 million euros have gone in an investment to put in the type of carbon filters, HEPA filters, scrub the air, make sure that things are not being vented that gets odor out in the community. So it's something that we're committed to. It's something that we've dealt with in our other facilities globally, and making sure that we're a good part of the community and that we're giving back to the community. I don't think that there's ever anything that's a one-time fix. It's something that you have to constantly be on. And we'll take the same approach that we have everywhere else. So we want the communities to be happy we're there, and that we give more than we take away. And I think that's a strong commitment from us.
Thank you. Look, I want to move the discussion now to projecting the market, but before I go there, I want to ask you a general question, and anyone can answer. It's really 3 questions. What would be your best estimate of the total combined cultivation capacity among the 10 LPs in the market right now? Second question would be, to your knowledge, and I know it's evolving, who are the top 3 sellers right now of those 10 LPs? And again, people start at different times, so maybe that's evolving. And also, are there any restrictions to the existing LPs buying other LPs? Anyone can start with that. And not everyone has to answer, but anyone that wants to share any thoughts on those 3 questions? No volunteers.
I would say, I think, at least to my knowledge, there's not restrictions on buying other LPs. Maybe there's a cap eventually. You get into antitrust type issues, but I don't think there's anything that restricts having more than one license, at least that we've seen in the regulations. And then I think capacity. Look, I would expect that you'll see participants will ramp until you get to the point that it doesn't make sense to continue increasing capacity. So, I think that quality is probably going to be really important, and being able to provide the right balance of value to consumers at different price points. I think that there'll be some, changes like there are all in every market, where people will experiment and figure out where that sweet spot is and where brands are positioned. But I would just say that given the limits on how expansion works, you've pretty much got a building that you're licensed for. And if your license isn't there, you can't just add something adjacent. So you can do things to add grow rooms. You can maybe go from 1 tier to 2 tiers. But you're not looking at the same type of capacity or expansion rates that you've seen, specifically in Canada, which is probably the biggest example of it. So I think it's less of a issue. But I think you'll also see probably much more focus on ROI, given you don't have the same public capital markets pouring dollars in.
Great, thank you. I want to move the discussion now. I'll start with you, Bastiaan. Projecting the market, right? And here I want everyone's views, please. But I'll ask the questions, Bastiaan. Here I'll read them once. But could the pilot towns add more coffee shops? I think Rick touched on that partly. How many more? Could more towns be added to the pilot? If we talk about per capita consumption, how high could per capita consumption get in the pilot towns? Anyway, your best way to project the market, Bastiaan, in the pilot towns and eventually in the country if the pilot gets expanded to other cities. Bastiaan.
Yeah, no, Rick definitely pointed out how it kind of works, because the municipality and the mayor has a lot to say in the Netherlands, in each of these municipalities. So ultimately, it's up to the mayor and to the city council and to what the regulations say as to how many coffee shops are allowed in a municipality. Now, when the pilot project started, it was originally projected that Utrecht would join, which is quite a large city. But eventually that fell through. And then the east side of Amsterdam was going to join with approximately 10 coffee shops. But then the mayor was really pushing for that, but the coffee shops themselves didn't want that. There was also a lot of coffee shops that were selling Moroccan hash. And as was pointed out, there was a big concern that they would lose a lot of customers. So due to the coffee shops and due to the city council kind of like hearing their concerns, that did not happen actually. So that is still something that could be on the table once there's enough supply, once there's enough diversity in terms of product range, and once everybody gets up and running. We know, for instance, that The Hague, where our government is located, the local city council has accepted a motion to join the pilot program whenever possible, and they have approximately 20 coffee shops. So as we expand and as the political climate allows, then it is definitely possible that more municipalities will be able to join, and that even mayors will allow more coffee shops, or other mayors are opting to join because they see the success and they see the benefits of the legality and of having a controlled market with controlled clean products in the shops. So that's going to be a few interesting years where it's also up to us to show that we can do this. And that we can lobby in the right places in order to just show the policymakers how it's done, and that there are so many benefits to this legalization.
Right. Thank you. I'll go to you, Vladimir, first. I mean, for the audience, I'm sorry that we'll probably go over the hour here, but we appreciate here the color from our speakers, of course. So your views on the potential growth of the pilot, Vladimir.
We see it more or less like stable. Yeah, I remember before experiment started, it was big discussion about South Amsterdam, so to be included, not, and then it stopped. So we see it's more or less like stable, but we really hope now we are more positive that experiments will be continue after the end of experience in 4 years.
All right, thank you. Rick, on the same question, if we can touch on political risk, right? Does the pilot get expanded? But if you can, and then the idea that per capita consumption in the pilot towns could be much higher than in the non-pilot towns. Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, we really don't know. They have set a fixed deadline for this experiment, which is a maximum of 5.5 years. I think with not the last elections, but the ones before, the party that won the elections, the PVV, was known to be opposed to cannabis legalization, and they wanted to stop with the experiment, but they didn't reach a majority vote. The current winner of the elections is the main pushing party of this experiment. So We are still unsure what happens, but it's interesting. From our perspective, I would be very welcome to invite Amsterdam East into the experiment again, but I'm not sure if that's politically on the table right now.
Thank you. Mike, on the same question, your outlook for how the market develops and evolves.
Yeah, look, I think that I think first I actually thought that the recent election result was positive. I think it's more about what the coalition is likely to look like versus who's necessarily the winning party. So it feels to me like it moved a little more left than we originally thought it would. And if I originally thought we look at you look at betting markets, and I thought it would be moving a little bit more right. But overall, we've seen a lot of different markets what happens, and when you add transparency to supply chain, you improve the safety of production, you create legal jobs and increase the tax base. I think those are things are all positive, and it's really difficult when you look at a market where the coffee shops aren't going to go away. You're not going to remove the retail component. So I think to give away all those other benefits and to say let's bring back an unregulated, opaque, not transparent supply chain, and bring some potentially unsafe business back into municipalities, I think it would be very unpopular from those municipalities. So I think at a minimum, the benefits are pretty strong, and it would be tough to put the toothpaste back in the tube, to use that expression we always use. As far as the pace of expansion, it's hard to predict. I think full legalization certainly depends, on what happens in the rest of the EU. I think watching Germany is something that's relevant. But I would expect some stability for the next 4 years within the experiment. There is one coffee shop that seems to be likely to be added in Q1. But we think that it's a good opportunity, even with the coffee shop staying stable, to be able to demonstrate that we're all responsible operators, and we can make this a better model for the future. And I'll just point out that I think that to the extent you see per capita consumption rising, that doesn't necessarily mean that the per capita consumption of consumers is rising. That may just be more share moving from illicit market to the legal market. And I think that's a benefit that the government would want to see, that you're moving towards a more safe and transparent supply chain.
Right. Thank you. Look, I know we're out of time. I want to read some questions from the audience, but very brief answers. Anyone can answer. Will the government need to license more suppliers? Rick, do you want to take a stab at that?
No, I think even in the event that one of the producers would not make it through the full duration of the experiment, I think the supply side is currently robust enough to absorb without a major disruption.
Okay. For you, Vladimir, someone asking, what's happened with the backdoor supply or Bastiaan in the non-pilot towns? I mean, how are they reacting to the pilot towns? Is the backdoor, the gray market suppliers, lowering prices or doing anything else to counteract the business they may be losing to the pilot towns? I don't know if Bastiaan or Vladimir wants to take a stab at that. Just a quick answer.
Well, some of them are happy because the suppliers that were supplying the current legal shops are now looking at other offset. So some coffee shops that are outside of the experiment are happy because they have more product available, and sometimes at better prices.
Yeah, it's a new dynamic, absolutely, in both segments of the market. Very interesting to analyze.
Do you mean the coffee shops in the non-pilot towns have more supply available? Is that what you mean, Bastiaan?
Yeah, because the suppliers that used to supply the backdoor of the pilot program coffee shops, they now don't have their offset in those markets. So they are now going to the other coffee shops, to those backdoors, so to speak. So there's definitely some changes.
Yeah. Mike, to your knowledge, are the 10LPs allowed to buy coffee shops, and would that be something you would consider? Short answer.
I don't believe there's an express restriction on it. Look, we consider everything. We generally don't pursue vertical integration. We'll monitor the market and see what makes the most sense. But our focus really is on making the best products and partnering with retail to make sure that they have the best assortment to get them out. We like markets where everyone has an opportunity to win. You have a diversity of different businesses. I think that you get the most variety that way. So again, like we'll monitor it, but we've avoided vertically integrating in any other markets, and we think it's a big enough market where I think everyone can win. And when you have that type of diversity, I think consumers are happier.
Right. Last question, Rick, for you. Any concerns that I know we touched on a lot, but any concerns that you would have about on the political side, on the current state of the pilot? If you were talking to a government, any feedback you would give them in terms of things they could fix or do better? I know it's a
No,
very
I,
good question, but
yeah, no, I think as legal growers, we have a collective interest in making this experiment succeed. I think the current politicians are seeing that. They're seeing everything is going according to plan most of the time. So no, I don't think there is a big risk in a government stopping the experiment. However, what happens after this experiment, yeah, we still have to be uncertain about, because they just did not define how it ends and what happens afterwards.
Right.
Either it stops or either it continues in the preparation of new legislation. But when it stops, what will happen is not defined.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Look, I'm going to give time. I know, and apologies to everyone for going over time here. I'll give time for everyone to make closing remarks. One thing that you may want to address when you touch on this is that, I visit many markets overseas, and sometimes I ask, like, what's happening in the US? Does it influence you? Like, if the US were to reschedule, does it have any influence in your overseas market? Someone in the DGA in Australia pretty much lectured me, telling me that they are a very sovereign country and that what happens in the US has nothing to do with Australia. But anyway, as you guys answer that question, is that could, rescheduling in the US, if we get that in this week, impact in any way positively other markets? And in your case specifically, Mike, if you want to touch briefly in terms of how rescheduling in the US would benefit Cronos. But closing remarks, I'll start with Vladimir.
So we expected super good, yeah, looking forward, and we were super happy with this deal, what Mike and Cronos did in Netherlands. So it shows that interest from big guys in North America is coming back to our part of the world. It's super nice. Looking forward for this reschedule. We are in quite close discussion with some friends from the industry in States as well. So it's good. Looking forward for this. In terms of experiment, this experiment is super unique. And now, as most of you maybe know, that it's also a big public discussion in Switzerland about regulation. And we hope in 2 years it will be also big, one more recreational market in Europe. We quite good position in Switzerland as well. So quite positive news for the industry for last months.
Thank you, Vladimir. Bastiaan, closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, the more markets open up, legalize, decriminalize, allow even for medical cannabis, it just changes the public opinion in a big way. It allows people to see this plant for what it can bring besides just getting you high. I mean, there's so many incredible benefits. So I think as this legalization allows more expansion, even of just hemp cultivation being used, as a replacement for cotton, plastic, biofuel. There are paper production, there's just so many things you can do with this plant, and that's something that we really need right now. The world is in a little bit of a crisis. So I think, the legalization will push this forward and will allow more acceptance and more tolerance towards this plant, and will allow people not to be so scared of it and to hopefully embrace it more across, all other industries as well. So I think we're at a crucial phase. So any kind of, descheduling and legalization is a big step forward. So yeah, we're glad to be a part of it.
Thank you. Rick, closing remarks.
No, I'm very happy with the companies of Vladimir and Bastiaan being able to set up their fully legalized production operation. I think it's a good thing for all the coffee shops in the market that all 10 producers are active and they have a lot to choose from. So that also adds to the sentiment of the coffee shops being positive about the experiment, because we cannot do it alone as legal producers. We also need the coffee shops to have a certain voice of happiness to the government, to the politics. And I'm happy how it's going so far. I hope we can continue this way.
Thank you, Mike. Closing remarks, and thanks again to all the 4 speakers for attending today. But Mike, yep.
Yeah, no, I would say I think for us, I just echo some of the comments. I think that every country that takes incremental steps towards legalization, it just further normalizes and takes away the stigma of legalizing cannabis. It makes it easier for each country. I think specifically for the Netherlands, it's really probably more about progress in the EU. But even within the EU, when you think about the UN convention, obviously the US, will play a part in how the UN views it. So the more medical legalization, the more adult use legalization we have anywhere, I think that will be helpful towards regulators. I think from a business perspective, you'll probably see somewhat of a capital vacuum, upon rescheduling or, any other type of regulatory advancement, where capital probably will focus less on international markets, more towards the US. For us, we were aware of rescheduling. It's something we've been expecting. We're, I think, in a fortunate position where we're not really picking between, US versus international. We look for the best opportunities. We're pretty disciplined with our strategy, and we feel we're positioned, regardless of where the market is. We already have very strong partnerships in the US with, our exclusive partnership with Altria. I founded, was a co-founder of Gotham Green, so we know a lot of the US cannabis companies. And so while we're monitoring some of the enabling regulations that will come through, I think you'll probably have a minimum of 6 months once HHS starts the rulemaking before those regulations are clarified. But I think it's going to be an exciting couple months. And we've been waiting for a long time, so it feels like the time is finally here.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Thank you very much to all our 4 speakers, and thanks everyone for joining today. Everyone have a good day, and of course, happy holidays to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.